Hey, thanks for stopping by today. Today we're going to do this mandala. It's made out of 1/8" glossy unisub hardboard. I purchased this file in Etsy. I'm going to leave the link in the description. So I imported the design into Lightburn. What we did is we modified it a little bit from a size perspective. I'm going to show you how to do that today. And then we're going to go ahead and once we generate our cut files in Lightburn for our laser, we're also going to go ahead and generate some additional outlines of our design, export them as SVGs, and we're going to import those SVGs into Affinity Designer, and that's what we're going to use as our basis for our patterns for each one of our layers on our mandala. The good thing about Affinity Designer, and I'm no expert when it comes to Affinity Designer, I've only been using it for about 4 months now, but you can drag your designs into those SVGs and it's real easy to kind of stack things together so you can actually see what this thing's going to look like before you even print it out and sublimate it. I love that. So we're going to start in Lightburn, we're going to end up in Affinity Designer, we're going to get our patterns printed out. We're going to sublimate each one of these pieces. We're going to go ahead and stack them up, glue them together, and you'll see how much fun something like this can be. One of the things that I absolutely love about a design like this is you could put monograms in the middle, letters, pictures, sayings, really whatever you'd like. The other thing you could do is you could put words on the perimeter ring that means something to you. So the neat thing about something like this is everybody's going to have a different spin when it comes to what your design is going to be on this. And I'm sure there's going to be all kinds of really cool designs that come out of this. So I really enjoyed this process. I'm going to do a lot more of this just because I thought it was so much fun. We're going to start in Lightburn, end up in Affinity Designer. Let's go check it out. So once I've purchased my file and downloaded it, one of the first things that I'm always going to do before I do anything is just come over and group each element, because I want to make sure that I don't mess up any kind of spacing. Right now you can see that these are all individual shapes, and if for some reason I'd start clicking around here and I move something, it could mess up the whole design. So typically the first thing I'll do is I'll come in and I'll just group each one, just to make sure that when I start to move these around, they're going to be fine. And so once I get these grouped, I'll go ahead and start to look at, zoom in a little bit and determine if they're a clean file. If they're not a clean file, I'll go ahead and do a little node editing to clean them up. So typically what I'll do is I'll just zoom in here, take a quick look, make sure the rings are nice and round. Make sure there's not anything that sticks out right quick. Now I do see some kind of an element right here. So let's take a look at that. So see, we've got an artifact right here. And I want to clean that up before I generate a cut file for this because we don't want this on our end product. So what I'll do is I'll select this. I'll come up here and ungroup this for the time being. Then I'll go over here to node editing, and let's zoom in a little bit so we can see what's going on here. And see, we've got an extra node right there, so I'm going to click and select that node and hit the D key for delete. And I'm also going to hit this node and I'm going to hit the D key delete for that, and that cleaned that all up. So now I can come back to select and go ahead and regroup it. And so let's just go ahead and see, that all looks fine. So we don't need to do, so it looks like that all of these are cleaned up now. Okay, so now that we've got each one of those grouped, one thing I did is this was a score line element here, and I actually pulled it out because I think I might want to cut this out as well and maybe make an additional layer. We'll just have to see how this pans out, but I think this might be an additional element that I'm going to actually use instead of just putting a score line on this piece here. So let's go ahead and finish up and make sure that each one of these is grouped. Got to make sure everything's grouped now. That's all grouped. That's all grouped. That's all grouped. Okay, so we've got everything grouped. We've got everything cleaned up. The next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and get the lines in the correct color for me. Red is my cut color. And so I'm going to select each element and come down here to red and turn all these red because all of these pieces are going to be cut out. I'm not going to be using this straight bar right here. And so now we've got all of our elements in red. You'll notice that I've got my this element here. Matter of fact, we're just going to go ahead and get rid of that. We'll stick it over here. We'll turn it off just so I don't see it. And I'm going to go ahead and make sure that now that it's all red, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to come down here to my 100-watt library. I'm doing this on a Thunder Nova 35 100-watt laser. We're going to come down here to unisub. We're going to come, it's not two-sided, but I'm going to use that setting. And we're going to flip that open. I'm going to select cut, and I'm going to say assign this setting to this layer. And so we'll go ahead and assign that. It's already that color, or excuse me, that setting. So it's 25 millimeters per second at 80% power. We're going to have our airflow on, and we should be good to go. Now, one of the other things that I noticed about this file, I plan on cutting this out of 1/4 inch unisub and then sublimating each one of these sections. And I noticed that when I select my outer ring, it's 12.75 inches across. Well, my sublimation printer prints at about 12 3/4 inches. The problem is I've got to expand this just ever so slightly to make sure that the design element that I put on this ring is going to cover all of the white unisub. So actually I need to shrink this whole design down just a little bit so I don't have a problem with getting what I need on my sublimation paper. So what we're going to do is we're going to rescale this whole thing down just a little bit so that way I don't have to worry about it. All right, in order for us to rescale this project, I'm going to put it all together, group it together, and rescale it all at once. And so what you definitely want to make sure you have on for this is if you come up here to your gear icon, you want to make sure your snap to objects is on. This will make life a lot easier if you have that on. And typically I leave this on all the time. It gives you the ability to snap one object to the center of another object, to the edge of the one object will snap in many different ways to another one. So if I select this here, and since they're all grouped, it'll be easy to pull apart once we resize it. And I'm going to go ahead and snap that to the center. Then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to turn this horizontal. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the period key once. That'll rotate it 90 degrees. And I'm going to go ahead and snap that in the center. And then I'm going to take this and I'm going to snap it in the center. And now we should have our design all put together. And so I'm going to go ahead and group this now. You wouldn't want to do this if you didn't have each one of those elements grouped, or it would be a mess. So just remember, each one of those elements needs to be grouped before you do this. So now what I can do is, since it's all grouped, you'll notice that I've got it at just over 12 3/4 inches. What I'm going to do is I'm going to keep this aspect ratio locked. And I'm going to come up here and I'm going to say, you know what? Let's just make this 12 inches. Hit tab. And I'm going to unlock this and just make this 12 as well. And now we've got a perfect 12-inch by 12-inch mandala that will fit on my sublimation paper. Okay, so now that we've rescaled it, we'll go ahead and take it back apart again, because our next process, we will want to create an outline of each one of these individual pieces that we can take into Affinity Designer and use it for our designs. And the reason why we want to use these and then grow them a little bit is you always typically want your design when you're sublimating, you want it just a little bit larger than your physical piece to make sure that you don't have any of that white unisub sticking out anywhere. So now that we've resized it, we're going to go ahead and take it back apart again, and we'll start to generate our offsets. All right, let's go ahead and take this back apart. There, now all of our elements are taken apart again. Just get them all over here so we can see how we're going to do this. Okay, I want to mention too that in this particular file that I purchased on Etsy, and I will give the link in the description, it had outlines that are already in Affinity Designer format. The issue with that is they're the same size as what you see here. And for sublimation, I want those outlines to be just a little bit bigger than what the actual physical dimensions are. So that's why we need to regenerate these offsets. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take each one of these elements and offset it using our offset tool right here, and save an SVG that's just a little bit bigger than each one of these components on our design. And that's what we're going to do next. All right, now we've got our design. This is our cut file for our laser. We don't need to do anything more with this information other than generate some output to our laser and go ahead and cut all these pieces out. And the other thing that we'll want to do that works out really well between Lightburn and Affinity Designer is I'm going to create some offsets. So the design that I pull into Affinity Designer is just a little bit bigger excuse me, for my design elements when I go to press them. And you're going to see a little later in the process why that's important to do it. So we could go ahead and cut all these pieces out now, and our next process is going to be generating some designs that we can use in Affinity Designer to print our patterns. So we're going to make our selection here. We're going to go to our offset tool, and that this is going to be about 5/10 is going to be about right. And we're going to go outward, so we're growing the ring. We're going to say OK. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in, and I want to make sure that my outside ring is selected, because that's what we want to output as an SVG. So I'm going to have the new offset that we generated selected. I'm going to come over here to Export. I'm going to go to my desktop. I've got a file folder here, and we're going to say outer ring. And say save. And then I'm going to delete it because I don't want to get them mixed up with my cut files. So then we can go ahead and come over here to the main portion of the mandala, and we'll do the same thing. We're going to offset that. Same distance, make sure that it's outward, and you can see that we've got a bigger mandala now. I'm going to make sure that that is all selected. And we're going to say File, Export. It's going to be an SVG as well, and we're going to say export that. Now I'm going to go ahead and delete that because I don't want to get it confused. Let's go over here to our smaller section, our third tier. Same thing, offset, outward, same offset, OK. We're going to make sure that the outside one is selected. File, Export, tier 2. Actually, I think that's tier 2. Okay, and I'm going to come back here and get rid of it. And then this one we're not sure we're going to use, but we might as well go through the process. Offset it. Okay. Select the outer ring. File. Export. And top tier. Okay. And go ahead and delete that. And all of our patterns that we're going to place in Affinity Designer came from our original design in Lightburn. So now we're pretty much done in Lightburn, meaning that the only thing we've got to do is we've got to go ahead and take these cut files to the laser, cut them out with 1/8 inch unisub, and then the rest of our work will be in Affinity Designer. Okay, so we've jumped into Affinity Designer, and before we get started in the layout, there's a couple of things that I wanted to show you. This is not meant to be a class in Affinity Designer. I've only been using this software for about 4 months, and so I can get around, but I'm certainly no professional at it. So there's lots of YouTube videos when it comes to Affinity Designer. There's some great master classes out there, and I would highly recommend that you use it. First thing we're going to do is I'm going to come up to view mode. I'm going to go down view mode, and I'm going to say I'm going to deselect clip to canvas. You'll notice that a lot of times this default is on, and what that means is that you can't see. The only place you've got to work is just right here. I don't prefer to do that. I like to have all my elements on the sides here, and so in order to be able to see those elements, we're going to go to View, View Mode, and turn the Clip to Canvas off. And that gives me the ability to have all of my design elements on the side here. When I generated a document that was 13 inches wide by 19 inches tall. That's the largest that my Epson EcoTank 15,000 printer will take. And so that's why I sized my design accordingly. That's as big as I can get width-wise, is about 12 3/4 or so. So the first thing that I did, just to save us a little time, is I came and I just placed or imported these designs to save us some time. I'll show you how to do that. We've got to come over here to make sure that we're in the designer persona. There's different personas that you'll use. One's vector persona, one's pixel persona. That's what I love about this software, is you don't have to go anywhere to use both. So we're going to make sure that the designer persona is selected. We're going to come down to place, and I'm just going to go ahead and pick one of my PNGs that I was going to use. I'm going to say open. I'm going to make sure that I've got my my snapping on, and I'm just going to come down here and place it. And at that point, all I've got to do is rotate it, scale it, and set it on the side. So that's what I've done with this piece of wood, this graphic here, and all of the elements that we need. I'm going to go ahead and delete that. Now that we've got our graphics imported, we're going to go ahead and bring in the SVGs that we exported from Lightburn. These are the actual outlines of the Mandala design, and these outlines are just slightly bigger than the actual pieces that I cut out on my laser. You're going to see why we do that when we get to sublimating or pressing these patterns on the unisub. You always want to have your pattern just a little bit bigger than the actual cutout on your laser, because if you don't and there's any kind of a misalignment, you will get white showing through, and it'll ruin your piece. So you're always going to grow your design just a little bit to make sure that you're completely covered when you sublimate your pieces for the Mandala. So we're going to come over here. We're going to make sure that we're in the designer persona. We're going to come over here to this little picture icon, click it. We're going to come up here and go to my desktop. Come over here and open up. These are the 4 SVGs that we exported from Lightburn. into a folder. And so we'll build this from the bottom to the top. So the first thing we're going to do is the outer ring. We're going to select the outer ring. We're going to say open, and then we're going to select the middle of this piece of paper. And you'll notice now this is the outside ring that's placed. We've got an SVG here. And the issue that you've got to deal with is right now I can't use this SVG. I've got to place some color in it in order for this process to work. If anybody else knows a better way to do this, I would love to hear it in the comments. So what I typically would do in this particular case is I would go ahead and add some color to this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to my outer ring. I'm going to rasterize it, right mouse click, rasterize. Then I'm going to come over here and it's going to turn this SVG into pixel based. I'm going to come over here to the pixel persona. I'm going to come over here to the paint bucket. And then I'm going to add a color. I don't care what color it is, you're never going to see the color. It just seems like you have to have a color before you can do the next process that I'm going to show you. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take this PNG and we're going to drop it inside this ring. So the only thing that you're going to see is this ring with this wood grain on the inside of it. And in order to do that, you want to make sure that your graphic is in your workspace, because if you don't and you click it, what's going to happen is it's going to disappear and you can't get a hold of it over here. So make sure that the graphic that you're going to drop into this ring is going to be apparent so you can see it. And you'll see what I mean here in just a minute. So right now we've got our wood graphic that we're going to apply to the bottom of our mandala ring. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take our outside ring and I'm going to drag it below the graphic that we want. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the picture of the graphic and I'm going to grab a hold of it with my mouse. I'm going to drag it down into the outer ring layer and over. And you notice now how that little bar goes from all the way across to indented. That's what you want. You want that to be indented. So what I've found is when you drag that picture, drag it over towards the label of the layer, and it will confine that pattern to the SVG that you imported and let it go. Now it's part. Now this PNG is part of this SVG. And now, see, if I would have done it, if I would have been over here and I would have done this, it would have deleted it completely to where I might not be able to grab it. So now you can go ahead and place it wherever it makes sense. Matter of fact, you'll notice this little screw right down here. When I printed my first one, I didn't see that. So what we want to do is we want to place that just so we hide that screw. You can size it, you know, to whatever you want, whatever you feel. This is personal preference type of deal. And there's our background. Okay, and so we've got our outer ring designed, and what we'll do is we'll repeat this process for each successive layer, building up to the final fourth layer. Let's move on to tier 2. So we're going to make sure that we're over here in our designer persona. We're going to come down here to our place tool. We're going to come here to the main. This is tier 2. We're going to say open. We're going to come back and we're going to place it right in the middle. And you can see now it is right in the middle. First thing we're going to do is we're going to come over here and we're going to right mouse click and we're going to say rasterize. That's going to turn it into a pixel based SVG. And we're going to add color to it. So I'm going to come over here to my pixel persona. Down here to paint bucket. And I'm going to color it. And at this point, because it's already black, I'm pretty much done with this particular layer. I'm not going to add a pattern, but you certainly could do that the same way you did with the circle, or change it to whatever color would matter to you. So at this point, we are done with this particular layout, and we will go to the next tier. Okay, we're going to go to tier 3, and for that, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my designer persona. In order to do this next process, I'm going to turn these 2 layers off just so it's a little bit easier to see. So I'm going to come over here and I am going to turn the outer ring off and the main tier off so we've got a clean slate. So we're going to come over here, make sure we're in the designer persona, come down to our place tool, come to the next tier. We're going to place it in the middle just so they're all lined up. And so at this point, we are going to right mouse click and rasterize. Then we're going to come over here to our pixel persona, down to our paint bucket, and add some color. All right. Now, what we're going to do next is we're going to go ahead and add this pattern onto this outline. Once we've got this pattern colored, we're going to go ahead and come over here and grab this piece of artwork and get it on our canvas so we can see it when we insert it into this design. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take our tier and we're going to drop it below this design. And then what we're going to do is we're going to come up here. We're going to make sure that this is rasterized as well, so it's a pixel. And then we're going to take this image, we're going to drop it down and over. And you see that it drops it in and it keeps it in that shape. And now I can pretty much, you know, do whatever I want from where it needs to lie. Now, one of the things you're going to keep in mind is we're going to do this wood grain right here in the middle of this. So we're actually going to have 2 different wood grains. And I'll show you how to do that next. And it's very easy. One thing I really like about Affinity Designer is using shapes to insert additional graphics, and it's very easy. Let's do that next. Okay, so for this next part, I want to make sure that I've got my guides that I can pull out. And if you don't see these rulers, you can come up here to view and you can show guides, show rulers. I like to typically have those on most of the time anyway. And so what we've got to do is we've got to generate a circle that will match this ring perfectly. And the best way to do that, or the easiest way I've found, is just drag out a guide on each one of the edges of this circle. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and generate a circle, and I'm going to just start up here. I'm going to hold down the Shift key, which locks the aspect ratio, and I'm going to drag a circle out until it snaps to the other side. Then what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to my tool and move it down, and it should snap to the center. And you see here that this graphic is not perfectly round. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unlock the aspect ratio down here, and I'm just going to stretch this just ever so slightly to cover that up. And we might want to do that over here. We just want to make sure. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn my snapping off for just a second because I want to make some fine adjustments. There we go. We just want to make sure that that is completely covered. And at that point, we're going to back out a little bit. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to grab our graphic, get it on our desktop. We're going to go ahead and take our circle and move it above the ellipse that we just made. I want to make sure that this is rasterized, so it's in pixel format. And then what I'm going to do, just like the others, I'm going to take that image, drag it down into the ellipse and over. And that will dump it into just that circle in the middle. And so you could see, you could put a picture there, or you can put whatever you want there. And now we've got a different wood grain here than we do here. You can resize it. Whatever you need to do, that's going to be personal preference. And now this particular tier of the mandala is completed. The only other thing we've got to do on this particular tier is add the text graphic. And so if I come back out, we can go ahead and grab that and bring it over here. And now because of how it's layered, you notice that it's behind there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that text and I'm going to drag it up to the very top. And then turn our snapping guides back on and make sure that this will snap to the middle. And now that particular layer is all together. Matter of fact, I would go ahead and select that, and I would select that and right mouse click and group it, just to keep our workspace nice and tidy. And at this point, we can go on to the next, our very top layer. Before we get going to our very top tier, I just wanted to show you some of the neat features when you get into your text, or really any different layer. You'll notice when I click on my text layer, you have this little FX indication. That's because there's a special effect. If I click on that, it's going to show that I have a bevel and emboss and all the settings, a 3D application applied to it, and also an outer shadow. And so that's how I got all the nice rounded edges, the drop shadow, and you can play with this, but you can actually do that on any layer. If we wanted to do something like this to give it a different look, you could actually come up here to your ellipse and add a graphic and do a 3D, and like I said, it will change the way things look. You can do your bevel and emboss, change your bevel and emboss. There's just lots of options here. So any layer you can do that to, but that's how I got this to look like it does, is I put a special effect on the text itself. Let's go to the last layer. Okay, so for our last tier, it's going to go pretty fast. It's just black. It's a pretty small piece, so there really would be no reason to put a pattern on it because you're not going to see it anyway. So we're going to go to our place. We're going to go to our top tier, open. We're going to make sure that our snapping is back on, and we're going to come over here and place it in the middle. And you can see we've got it. Now the first thing we've got to do is we've got to come up here and right mouse click and rasterize that. And then we're going to come over here to our pixel persona, grab our paint bucket, and color it. And it just happens to be black already. So we're done with that particular layer. Let's go ahead and turn them all back on now. And we will see what our mandala looks like. And that, my friends, is how you build a mandala in Affinity Designer that started in Lightburn. Next, we're going to go ahead and show you how to print these out. We will print these out one at a time. There's a couple of these that we'll probably put on two on the same piece of 13 by 19 sublimation paper. Once we get them printed out, it'll be time to press it. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and start printing this out. I'm not going to show you how to print each individual piece out, but I will show you how I start it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off all of these tiers except for the very bottom one. This is what I'm going to print out first. I'm going to come up here to File, Print. I'm going to select my Epson EcoTank 15000. I'm going to come down here to Range and Scale and go to Print Settings. I'm going to make sure that my 13 by 19 paper is selected. It's going to show me how much of that it's going to take up. I'm going to set it at Premium Presentation Matte Paper and Print Quality Normal. Now you'll see a lot on the internet of going to Best, and what I found, at least for this particular printer, is going to Best puts down too much ink and it starts to make black marks on the edge of the paper. And I'm having really good results with just the Print Quality Normal. I'm going to mirror the image, especially when we get down to the point where I've got a letter. You've got to make sure that your images are mirrored so they turn out. And I'm going to go ahead and print that out. And then what I would do for each successive piece, I would just go ahead and turn this off and turn that on, print that one out, and do that for all of the different tiers. Once we have all of them printed out, I'll show you how to sublimate it. Once you get your unisub cut out from your laser, you got to remember that there's a plastic coating on it. You want to leave that coating on until you're done cutting it out, because every place the laser starts, there's a little dark mark, and you want that to stay on the plastic, or the majority of it on the plastic, instead of on your unisub. Now this unisub's not cheap. It's about the same price as acrylic, so it's going to be 3 to 4 cents a square inch. So you don't want to, lose a lot of this stuff because it's not cheap. This Mandala material cost is probably about $12 to $13, but you want to make sure that you remove all of the plastic covering on this unisub and make sure all the dark marks, like these little dark marks that are right here, you want to wipe off with a microfiber towel and get this nice and clean before it's time to unisub or to sublimate it. So that's what I'm going to do next. I'm going to remove all this plastic, and then we're going to go in the office where the sublimation equipment is and go ahead and press it. Again, this is unisub single-sided 1/8 inch. It does have a plastic coating on it. Make sure you remove it before you sublimate it, or it'll be a gooey mess. While we're waiting for the for the press to heat up, we'll go ahead and start putting our unisub on our printed sublimation paper. And so the first thing I'm going to do is put a piece of just blowout paper, regular butcher paper, down on the press. We'll go ahead and take a piece, put it down on the press. We'll take our pattern. We're going to go ahead and do our ring first. And we're going to put our sublimated ring down. And so this is a reason why you would want to make sure that this pattern is wider on both sides than this pattern here. And you'll see here in a minute. Now what I'm going to do, just to make sure this is perfectly clean, I'm going to go ahead and lint roll it just to make sure that I don't have any pieces of black. When you wipe this off, there's little black specks that can get on it, and you'll see it in your pattern if you don't get it. So I just lint rolled that, made sure that was all nice and clean. And so I see one little spot right there. You just want to take a good look and make sure, use your light, make sure that there's no fingerprints, no black marks, because if there is, you're going to see it. You only got one shot with this stuff. So use your light, have some good light. So I'm going to turn this over now, and I'm going to go ahead and place this ring, and I want to make sure that I can see print on the outside of this inner ring and the outside of the outer ring. And that way I'm assured that there's not going to be any part of that white unisub sticking out. And that's why you want to grow your design just to make sure. So once you've got that pretty much in the center, and you've got, you can see print all the way around both sides, we'll go ahead and tape that down. Now I'm just going to use some heat tape here and tape it down just so when I flip this over it doesn't move. Just want to kind of keep an eye on it, make sure it's not moving in any way. And so I'm just going to tape it down 3 or 4 places. I'm going to do this to every piece that we do, so it's exactly the same. So at this point, since I've got it taped down, I'm going to go ahead and flip it over. And if I've got it taped well, it's not going to move at all. I've got a piece of blowout paper underneath my pattern. I'm going to go ahead and get one more piece of blowout paper. I'm going to put it over. And the reason why we use this blowout paper is that ink that's on that sublimation paper will actually turn into a gas and go into the unisub. And so you got to make sure that you've got everything protected, because as it turns into a gas, you'll see when we take it apart, there'll be ink in places where the unisub was not. And so we're going to wait till this press gets heated up. We're going to press it at 400 degrees for 60 seconds for this unisub. I've had really good luck with that time and temperature. And as soon as the press heats up, we'll go ahead and get it pressed. Okay, we've got about 10 seconds left, and so I'll put on my heat gloves here, and we'll pull this out, and we'll reveal it together. Okay, go ahead and pull this out. You've got to remember this stuff is very, very hot. Take that off. This is always my favorite part, is to go ahead. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take this, and I'm going to pull it back, and you can see, there we go. And our pattern has been sublimated on our ring. And see, you don't have any white marks on any of the edges. It's got a beautiful finish, nice and shiny. So that's our ring. And you can see now, see all the ink that came around the edge. That's why you put this blowout paper down below it, or you'd have that ink all over this cover. So we'll go ahead and do the next ones. And let's take a look, see what she looks like. Oh, nice. Look at that. Beautiful color. Not any marks anywhere. Take off the tape here. We'll let this cool. And press the next tier. You'll notice that the initials changed because I'm doing one for somebody else here. Get rid of this. And here we go. Let me turn it around so you can see it for the reveal. All right. Take that. And there you have it. Looks great. I'll take the tape off of that, let it cool, and go ahead and press our very last piece. And here's our last piece. Let's see how we did. Now this one's pretty fragile, so you got to be careful because it's not very big. And so you just want to be careful. There we go. And as you can see, it's sublimated real nice. Nice and black. We'll let it cool. Then we'll go ahead and stack these together and see how it looks. And that is the complete sublimation process. So we started in Lightburn. We generated our SVGs. We incorporated those SVGs into Affinity Designer. We placed our graphics inside those SVGs, printed them out on sublimation paper, pressed them with, this is a Fusion IQ Hot Tronics 16x20 press at 400 degrees at 60 seconds. And we've got ourselves a mandala. Let's go ahead and stack it together. And there you have it. It's all stacked together. It's not glued up. I just use super glue, CA glue, to put these together, and they seem to hold up real good. This project's a lot of fun. The other thing you could do is you could actually put another insert here if you didn't want this reveal. But as you can see
follow the process. It's not that hard. I hope you...
Well, as you can see, that was a lot of fun. Between the laser work and the sublimation work, you can create some really unique things with this process. I appreciate you stopping by today. If you like my content, please give me a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. And if you have the ability, go ahead and hit that thanks button. Contribute to the channel. That makes a huge difference in the amount of content I can bring to the channel. I sure appreciate it. Until next time, thanks and have a great day.